it is necessary that all the Indians, all Indian people should celebrate, should remember what kind of exercise took place while drafting the Constitution of India.
Friends, my name is Abhay Kumar, and with me Dr. Umakant from Jawaharlal Nehru University has agreed to talk about Constitution Day and importance of Dr. Bhim Ambedkar in making of Constitution. Sir, thank you very much for joining. We all know that on 26th of November 1949, Indian Constitution was adopted by Constituent Assembly, and later in 1950 on 26th of January it was implemented. Sir, why this day is important?
This day is important because on 26 November 1949, when the Constitution was adopted in the Constituent Assembly of India, India entered a new phase of its life. India having secured, having gained the independence from the long British rule, the making, or perhaps you can say the drafting of the Constitution, was a milestone in the history of contemporary India. And that is why I think it is necessary that all the Indians, all Indian people should celebrate, should remember what kind of exercise took place while drafting the Constitution of India. That was to decide the fate and future of India. And that is why it is important that we celebrate the Constitution Day as a republic which not only talks about the fundamental ethos, which is based on the principles of liberty, equality and fraternity, not only in theory but also in practice. India has to move on the path of making a silent revolution wherein the liberty, equality and fraternity would turn into a reality. And that is why it is being celebrated now, and today being we have entered into the 73rd year of an independent, democratic, socialist, secular democratic republic. And today I will be speaking on Babasaheb Dr. Ambedkar's last speech in the Constituent Assembly of India when the Constitution was being adopted. It is very necessary that we revisit his speech because of its relevance today. He was of the opinion that if India has to remain a democratic country, it should remain democratic not only in content but also in fact. And he was also of the opinion that to do that, what do we need to do? What must we do? He talked mainly about three things, and I shall be highlighting the significance of those three things and how those things are relevant even today. The first thing he said that we must do to maintain democracy in content and also in fact is to hold on to the methods of constitutionalism in realizing our socio-economic objectives. What did it mean? It meant that we have to abandon the bloody revolution approach. It also meant that we have to abandon the idea of civil disobedience. We have to abandon the idea of satyagraha, because these will only create anarchy in society, and that is why he used the term, these are the grammars of anarchy. And in order to avoid such things, we have to hold on to the constitutional means for, taking care of the socio-economic contradictions that we have inherited from thousands of years in this country. And that is why it was important. The second thing that he talked about that we must do is, and he quoted from John Stuart Mill, that we should not lay our liberty at the feet of some great leaders. Even if they may be great, but we should always remember that we are giving that person, permission from our side to become a future dictator. So in that sense, he was of the opinion that bhakti or the hero worship is sure path towards dictatorship in future. And that is why we must avoid that, and we must not give too much of importance to hero worshipping in democracy. The third thing that he felt was very important, and it's quite relevant even today, was that he said we must not remain content only with political democracy. He was of the opinion, very strong opinion he had about the absence of social and economic democracy. And he used to always say that political democracy would always remain meaningless if there is no social and economic democracy. What shall we do? Because we know there is inequality in our society, there is inequality in our economy. What shall we do? And in that context, I'll be quoting here a small portion of his speech, which was delivered on the last day of the debate in the Constituent Assembly by Dr. Ambedkar, wherein he says, and it is very essential to qualify here by saying that on 26 November 1949, certain part of the Constitution was being put into operation. The full operationalization of the Constitution started from the 26 January 1950 onwards. So as a mark of warning, Dr. Ambedkar says that from 26 January 1950 onwards, we are going to enter into a life of contradiction. In politics, we will have equality. One man, one vote, one value. But in society and economy, there will still be inequality. We must bridge this gap as early as possible, or else those who suffer from these social and economic inequality will blow up the whole structure which we have so laboriously built up. That was a warning, and I think in last 74 years of our independence, we are realizing that we should not remain content merely with political democracy. In the absence of social and economic democracy, we keep on compromising, and we have reached a stage where the nation state itself seems to be in crisis. And it is very important in this connection to understand the message that Ambedkar was trying to give on 26 November 1949 during his speech in the Constituent Assembly of India, when he said that liberty, equality and fraternity should be the basis of our social life. These three, he called them Trinity, and he said it cannot be seen in isolation. They have a meaning only in association with each other. And he went on to say that liberty and equality would remain meaningless if there is no fraternity in the society. And he even cautioned the members and also the people of India that we should not remain under illusion that we are a nation. Because he was of the opinion that a society based into thousands of castes and communities, which also doesn't have fraternal relationship among different castes and communities in this country, how can it be a nation? And our foremost task should be to build up fraternity in society by dismantling the socio-cultural, religious inequalities that have been operating in this country, in this part of the world since millennia. So that is why it is very important today, when we are living under a majoritarian, the so-called majoritarian democratic system, where minority voices are being suppressed, and not only being suppressed but also attacked on a regular basis. It is very important. It's not only with the religious minority that hatred is being propagated and being practiced in this country, but also with the former untouchables who are called Dalits, the Adivasis, and perhaps several other caste and communities which are small in numbers. They do not have much say in the democratic process in the country, except that they have a vote which they use during the election time. But more than that, they are also voiceless. So several kinds of, the farmers are in crisis because agriculture is in crisis. There is too much of importance given to corporatization and capitalism and capitalistic mode of development in this part of the world. We know we have reached a stage of neoliberalism where the capitalist will play a more important role than state being a socialist state. So in that situation, it is very essential that if we do not follow the fundamental ethos of our constitution, we may have a democracy only in name. And that is why it is very important that we not only follow what Ambedkar said during his birth anniversary and death anniversary, but we should also follow him into our everyday life. Because the kind of contribution that he made while drafting the constitution of the country, we must be thankful to him that he at least gave a framework to us under which we can work unitedly. If we don't follow it, if we don't believe it, then there is no problem at all. India can declare itself to be, a majoritarian state where one system or one unified system will dominate everything. But those forces should understand that the real strength of this country lies in its diversity, not in uniformity. And that is why, while celebrating the Constitution Day, we should celebrate the contributions made by Dr. Ambedkar and other leaders who fought for the country's independence and made a constitution which would help us in building a better future, a better deal for people of this country.
Sir, you are a student of political science also. I was reading Austin's book, very famous book on Indian Constitution. And he was basically talking about the fact that the Indian Constitutions was made to foster social revolutions. While saying this fact, he also says that the issue of national security and unity, they became transcendental. They become very important. So my point is that while Indian constitutions has given rights to the most marginalized sections of this community, let's say Dalits, who have been ruled by the Manu Dharmas for a long time, so they have every reason to celebrate these constitutions because at least they have got a formal equality. On the other hand, we have also seen that in this making of the constitution, the making of the constitutions, there were some extra judicial laws, that draconian laws, they were also put into that constitutions, which led to violations of liberty of the people of this country. So how to respond to that criticism? Was Ambedkar unaware of that fact, or given the size and given the composition of Constituent Assembly, he was not able to check those extra constitutional laws to be incorporated into the Constitution? Sir, your take.
As an answer to your second question, what I'll say is that yes, indeed, what Austin was saying, that the aim and objective of drafting the Constitution of India was to usher in the process of social revolution in this country. But at the same time, what we see is that Ambedkar was only one person, and the entire Constituent Assembly was dominated by, most of the members were from the Indian National Congress, and most of them were Gandhian also,
Upper caste also?
Yes, upper caste also. There were very few Dalit and Adivasi members, and then Muslims were also very few, not many actually. So that way he did not have much leeway in piloting the document that he had prepared. So he had to make several changes, because members had their own ideas that how Indian democracy setup should be incorporated into the Constitution of India, because most of the members were interested in following the Gandhian model of Ram Rajya. But Ambedkar and several other people like Nehru, Rajendra Prasad, they had different take on these things. So they finally agreed with Ambedkar, and they said that we want to make a constitution for modern India. But as far as the question of those draconian law getting into the Indian law book is concerned, I mean, we have a legacy of such laws which somehow managed to remain on our law book even after we drafted a constitution. It is very important actually to understand that a state, as per its constitution, should have different set of laws to deal with different kind of situation. It is always good that state's primary concern should be the welfare of its citizen. But at the same time, any modern state is also empowered with certain laws which may seem unwarranted. And that's why these are extraordinary emergency powers which should be used by the state in the rarest of the rare circumstances, when there is a threat, internal rebellion, say for example. And that is why Ambedkar made it a point to emphasize that these, even the emergency provisions in the Constitution of India, should be used in the rarest of the rare circumstances. So that is why you will see that Indian state with its draconian law continued even in the new constitution and the new setup that we have in this country after India got independence, and it drafted its own constitution, which became partly operational in 1949 and fully operational from 26 January 1950 onwards. So the one reason for having these kind of things in extraordinary situations, and the argument which was put up by Dr. Ambedkar and others in the Constituent Assembly of India, was that there has to be a check and balance on every organ of the state. It is necessary, and that is why not only the organs of the state, the executive, the legislature and the judiciary, not only on these three organs of the state, but also on society at large, there has to be check and balance. Because only through check and balance you can make sure that your system will work in an orderly manner. So these extraordinary measures, these extraordinary draconian laws at times may seem undemocratic, but these are like necessary evil that modern state carries on with it. And that is why I think we have to remain content with some of those still creeping into our system. I am not saying that capital punishment should be justified. I am perhaps the first person to say that capital punishment should not be there on our law book. But there are several other things. It's not that Ambedkar was not aware about these things, but perhaps he was a one-man army, and he also might have been helpless in pushing into several things which he wanted to do, but he was helpless because he had to seek cooperation from other members in the assembly, and perhaps they wanted such kind of things to remain on our law book, and that is why these things are there. So I am not surprised, and I would not blame Ambedkar for these draconian laws to be there in our Indian law book.
There are also criticism of Indian constitution from two sides, from the left and from the right. The left is of the opinion that it was not democratic enough to say that the Constituent Assembly was not elected through what I should say universal franchise, and property was the criteria for casting your vote, something like that. And the right to property was also incorporated into our constitutions, and it was given protection. On the other hand, the right-wing forces have a problem that it is not Indian enough. And when they say Indian, we must understand it is not Hindu enough. Yes. And when you say Hindu, they mean why not? It is based on Manu Smriti. Yes. And when Vajpayee was the prime minister, there was a controversy that a government is going to review the constitutions, and then there was so much uproar. And now when the new Hindutva regime with much more power, Narendra Modi Sahab has come to power, we have seen that there has been several movements by the minority group and by, let's say, Dalit groups who are talking about save constitution. Somehow they believe that there has been a design by the Hindutva forces to do away with the constitution, or at least to remove those progressive elements in the constitutions and deprive and deny the lower caste of the very little rights which they have got around 1947. So I would like your views on the left criticism and the right criticism, and you should also answer it. Constitution is never a dead document. Okay, yes. It is living. There has to be a scope for changes. But why Dalit community is not willing to appreciate any change? Is it due to the fact that they have seen or they have felt the atrocities of Dharma Shastra, or is it to do with the kind of political atmosphere we have? So your take on these three issues, you take it collectively, the left critique, the right critique, and can constitutions be amended or not, or can it be modified or not?
See, as far as the criticism of the left group in this country is concerned, they have always been of the opinion that in fact, the independence that we got from the British was not the real independence. And in fact, it used to be a slogan by a very famous communist leader that "Ye azadi jhuti hai, desh ki janta bhukhi hai." That kind of slogans also they used to propagate. But then it is important to understand that what kind of system we had at the time India got independence. And for such a vast country, not only in terms of its geographical boundaries, but also in terms of the population that we have in our country, everybody was in a hurry. The Congress members, other political leaders, everybody was in a hurry, and everybody wanted that there should be a constitution. In fact, there was some exercise from 1925 onwards when Nehru Committee was appointed by the Indian National Congress, and they perhaps prepared, a small kind of a document which was like a future constitution of India. But then, in between, the Government of India Act 1935 also was drafted, and there were several things which were taken up from there. So it's very. And in fact, at the end of the day, when Ambedkar was discussing that why it took so much of time to draft the constitution of the country, and he made a very valid argument saying that when the world has already seen drafting of constitution by so many countries, what is it new that India would produce? So there has always been a criticism that Indian constitution is a patchwork, taken from Irish constitution, taken from Australian constitution, taken something from US constitution, then something from the British constitution, the kind of constitution, a non-written constitution that they follow there, and several things that were already existing, South African constitution also in that sense. So it's a valid thing that Indian constitution is a patchwork, but it's a patchwork for the benefit in the larger interest of the people of India. There was nothing new that Ambedkar or any constitutional expert would have drafted at that point of time. That is one point. And the second point that I want to highlight here is that, yes, the kind of electorate or the electoral system through which the Constituent Assembly members were elected was not true democratic, it was not truly democratic in that sense. It is true. I mean, like any other member, Ambedkar was also elected through the same process. First, he was elected from Jessore Khulna, which is now in Bangladesh. And then later, after the partition of the country, he was re-elected from Bombay Presidency. So he was also elected through the same process through which other members were elected. That is true. I mean, that was one valid criticism that, like, you know, it was not truly representative, it was not truly democratic. But the very fact that so many members were elected from different parts of India, and then, you know, there were also representatives of the former princely estates, it was in a larger sense, or in a perhaps more practical sense, it was quite representative in that sense. There were members elected from different states in India, from different corners of India, speaking different languages from India. So in that sense, one should not see it from a limited perspective of saying
sir,
that
the right to property.
Yes, the right to property thing. I mean, there were several things, as I said earlier, which got into our constitution, which may or may not should have been there. So in that sense, right to property was also one fundamental right that was incorporated. The idea was not to, you know, protect the invalid interest of the propertied class. In fact, even, you know, a low income earning person, right to property could be protected under that. So we should not see it from that perspective only, that it was favorable only to the rich people, the propertied class. It was also applicable, that right to property was also applicable to other people who are not equally rich, who are not equally propertied, like the former Maharajas and things like that. In fact, like, you know, the privy purse was also retained, you know, in our political setup. The privy purse, which was operational during the British time, when British government used to, you know, donate certain amount of money to the princely estates in India. And those princely estates who, you know, agreed to become part of the Indian Union after India got independence, they were continuing getting financial support from the government of India. It was abolished later on in 1971, perhaps, I think around in the decade in 70s by the Indira Gandhi government at that point in center. So I'm saying that, like, you know, there are several things which remained on our law book, which remained in our constitution, which were not good at that point of time, which were somehow repealed at a later point of time. In fact, there are several other things which during course of time they may be amended, they may be removed from the constitution because they would lose their relevance, and people in power, as also people in different political parties, would realize that we should not remain content with those things remaining on the law book, remaining in the Constitution of India. And the second thing about the rightist element, they always criticize that, and they were always the Hindu Sabha member, all India Hindu Sabha members who had become the members in the Constituent Assembly, they always used to advocate that India should go for a Ram Rajya, India should, you know,
the constitution is foreign.
Yes, constitution is foreign because it is taken from English constitution, it is taken from, you know, all other foreign constitution, and there is nothing Indian in this. By Indian, they perhaps meant that there is nothing Hindu in this, there is nothing Brahmanical in this, there is no Manu Smriti in this, so how could we call it our constitution? So, but Ambedkar and other people in the Constituent Assembly who were progressive enough to claim that we are preparing a constitution for the future, for the present and the future of this country, not for the past of this country. Our past may have been a past of Manu Smriti, based on the principles of liberty, equality and fraternity, was not based on the principles of justice and accountability. That is why there is no need for Manusmriti. And that is why you will not see the elements of Ramarajya or the elements of Manusmriti getting into the Constitution of India, because the idea was to foster, as you said very rightly in the beginning, that the idea was to usher in a process of social revolution, which will, ensure peace, which will ensure justice to each and every citizen of this country. And that is why it is important that today, in our today's present context, it is important to understand the significance of Constitution and the ethos that it applies to every citizens in this country, that without discrimination on the basis of caste and creed, every citizen will be treated equally in this country. But what we are seeing now with the emergence of the majoritarian Hindu fascist regime, India is not an exception, one could say. But the fact that I was saying earlier, that the regime of hatredness is spreading. It is not spreading only against certain sections of the religious minority groups in this country, but in the name of making it in a very subtle way. India, a majoritarian state, India where uniformity will be respected rather than diversity. So that is why you see that the government has been trying to impose certain changes through Citizenship Amendment Act and new kind of things which were imposed for the agriculture sector and several other things. We could go on giving examples that how state is acting against its own constitution, state is acting against its own people, because they are trying to impose their own ideology, which doesn't find consonance with what we have in our constitution. And that is why people who believe in the Constitution of India, they have been leading a movement to save the Constitution of India, and it is very essential that we should strengthen those people who are here to save the Constitution of India. By saving the Constitution of India, they will not only save the people of India, but will also save the future of this country.
I would like to take more and more questions from you, but time is limited. The last question, final question.
Yes.
Recently, we have seen one controversy around the issue of secularism. And the Hindutva forces are saying that the term secularism was incorporated into Indian constitutions of late, and they are using that issue to criticize Congress party, to say that when the constitution was made, the makers of the constitutions were wise enough not to put these words into constitutions, but it was the politics of the Congress party which brought it, and somehow they are projecting it, this very process of incorporation of secularism into the constitutions, as a move against Hinduism or maybe the Hindu culture, something like that. So what is your view on this controversy, and do you think that the Hindu right forces and its rise in politics should be a cause for the deprived section to feel concerned that the constitutions might be tampered with or might be changed and their rights might be taken back? Or the roots of Indian democracy is so deep that now they cannot undo the historical gains which has been made? Sir, your reaction?
It's very important that you ask this question. It is important in a sense that we have to understand that why the word secularism was not included when the constitution was being drafted, and why it was included at a later stage in the 1970s when Indira Gandhi was in power. See, there was a discussion in the Constituent Assembly. Some members were saying that we should write the word secular also. While agreeing with the members, Dr. Ambedkar was the opinion that we are secular in every sense of the term if you read our constitution. So why do we need explicitly mentioning it in the constitution that we are secular. I mean, every word, every provisions of the constitution is a symbol of secularism in this country. There is nothing in the constitution which is against the principles of secularism. So that it was just, a play of words. So that's why he did not feel it necessary to use the word secularism separately, or in association with other words that have been used, socialist, democratic republic, and other concepts that have been used in our preamble. So at a later stage, that's why it is important to understand that somehow several people were not able to relate, and that is why a decision was made by the then government of the day that we must include to re-emphasize the fact that yes, we are secular in every sense of the term. So in that sense, it was not I would not say that it was a betrayal by our earlier leaders that why they did not include the word secularism. I mean, everything according to them that was written in the constitution at that point of time was secular. So it was just filling in that gap. The future government decided that we will have it there.
But sir, your view, why it has been politicized now?
It has been politicized because there are people, there are organizations in this country who see India as a Hindu state, and that from that point of view, everything which is not Hindu is against the interest of the country, against the interest of the people, and that is why it becomes pseudo, and it becomes minority appeasement and things like that. So you should not be surprised when these people, these organizations, they always criticize the Indian constitution and they want to reconvert it into a code of conduct from their ancient past. So I'm not surprised that they are not very happy, and every time they come into power, they try to review, they try to bring in certain measures which is aimed at reviewing the constitution and bringing those things back into our law book, which were part of the Manusmriti, the Hindu Code, which was based on certain privileges for certain sections of society and no privileges, only duties for the rest of the society. So from that perspective, it is important to understand that why these questions are being raised now, and why we should understand the significance of the Constitution Day, that those things that were drafted in the Constitution of India was to safeguard the interest of the people of this country, and there have always been an attempt to see it from different perspective, and we should all welcome such things. There is nothing wrong in seeing it from a different perspective, but the point that I'm trying to make here is that the fundamentals on which our principle, the constitution is based, that should always be respected. Everybody is free to have their own opinion, but it should not be at the cost of the Indian Republic. And that is why I request everyone that those who stand for India, they should stand with the Constitution of India, and herein lies not only a better present but also a better future for this country.
As usual, it has been very nice talking with you, and I have learned a lot from your study and your experience and your activism. Dr. Umakant from Jawaharlal Nehru University has been talking with us on Indian constitutions, and the day is very apt. Today is Constitutions Day, which is being observed and celebrated whole through the country, and we have learned the importance of Indian constitutions and several challenges related to it. Please give your comment also, and watch it and share with your friends so that good idea is spread. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Kindly like, share and subscribe our YouTube channel.